In the quiet suburban areas of Los Angeles, an intricate heist was being planned that would become one of the most infamous robberies in U.S. history. A group of criminals, led by the skilled and elusive Dincio, devised a plan to infiltrate the Bank of America's vaults. Their strategy was not just bold, but groundbreaking. Rather than the usual methods, they chose to dig an underground tunnel, something that had never been attempted on such a scale before. The gang led by Dincio wasn't made up of amateurs. Each member had a specific skill set that contributed to the execution of the plan. There were explosives experts, engineers, and even insiders within the bank itself. These individuals were carefully selected for their knowledge and ability to pull off such a dangerous heist without drawing attention. Their preparation was meticulous, ensuring that the tunnel they were about to dig would lead directly to the heart of the vault. The group began digging the tunnel under the cover of night. Using heavy-duty tools and equipment, they excavated more than 30 feet of solid ground, which took several weeks to complete. The work was slow but deliberate. The criminals knew that if the tunnel was discovered too early, their entire plan would fail. They worked silently, making sure that each movement was calculated, and by the end of the month, the tunnel was finally ready to give them access to the vaults. As the tunnel reached the vault's outer walls, the criminals needed to break through reinforced steel doors. They used dynamite to create a controlled explosion. The blast was loud enough to be heard in nearby buildings, but the criminals had already taken precautions, ensuring the explosion wouldn't alert the bank's security system. When the dust settled, the vault door was wide open, revealing millions of dollars in cash ready to be seized. With the vault opened, the criminals quickly began loading up the cash into bags. The heist was unfolding perfectly. As they moved from one pile of money to the next, they used specialized equipment to ensure that no one would be able to trace the money back to the bank. The money was stolen without a single shot fired, and with precision, they moved from the vault to the tunnel and out into the night. After taking the cash, the thieves made their escape using the tunnel they had spent weeks digging. It was an almost flawless getaway. As they emerged from the tunnel, they found a secluded spot where they had parked vehicles, ready to whisk them away. There was no need for high-speed chases or dramatic escapes, just a smooth, quiet exit that left no immediate evidence behind. The gang split up and disappeared into the night, each part of the plan executed perfectly. For weeks, the police had no leads, and the case seemed to go cold. The Bank of America heist had been executed with such precision that there was no immediate evidence left behind. The tunnel had been destroyed after the thieves had made their escape, and the bank's vault showed no signs of forced entry. It was as if the criminals had vanished into thin air. Authorities were left baffled, wondering how such a large-scale robbery could have been carried out without a single clue. The case would remain unsolved until one critical breakthrough. An unlikely piece of evidence, a set of fingerprints found on an abandoned tool near the vault, was discovered by accident. It was the first tangible clue that linked the robbery to the criminals. Investigators ran the fingerprints through their databases, and the match was made to one of the known criminals involved in a string of similar heists. It was this key discovery that would lead authorities on a trail that ultimately uncovered the full scale of the crime. The authorities' investigation led them directly to Dincio, the mastermind behind the heist. A manhunt was launched as Dincio was known for his elusiveness and criminal expertise. Law enforcement worked tirelessly to track his whereabouts, piecing together his movements in the months leading up to the robbery. They learned that Dincio had made several out-of-state trips, carefully laying the groundwork for the crime. His ability to blend into different environments made him a difficult target to catch, but the police were determined to find him. After weeks of searching, the FBI finally located Dincio. His arrest came as a result of tracking his associates' movements, who had unknowingly given up Dincio's location. It was a quiet operation, no dramatic gunfights, no explosive confrontations. Instead, Dincio was arrested without a struggle, caught at the very moment he least expected. His capture was a significant step forward in solving one of the most daring and complex bank heists in U.S. history. With Dincio in custody, authorities were able to piece together the details of the heist. During the trial, the prosecution laid out a meticulous account of how the gang had carried out the robbery using the tunnel. Witnesses described the events leading up to the crime, including the planning and preparation that had taken months. The defense tried to argue that Dincio was merely an accomplice, but the evidence was overwhelming. The courtroom was filled with tension as the details of the crime were slowly revealed, and Dincio's fate seemed inevitable. The investigation revealed that Dincio had planned the heist down to the smallest detail. He had rented several properties near the bank, ensuring the gang had easy access to the vault. The tunnel had been dug beneath an old building across the street, allowing them to break in without attracting attention. The evidence against him continued to stack up, including testimony from a former associate who had turned state's witness. Dincio's involvement in the planning and execution was irrefutable. Despite the mounting evidence, Dincio remained defiant. Throughout the trial, he claimed that he was set up and that the prosecution was framing him for a crime he didn't commit. His defense lawyers tried to poke holes in the case, suggesting that the police had made errors during the investigation. However, the jury was not swayed by his arguments. The clarity of the evidence and the testimonies from key witnesses made his denials seem increasingly desperate. After several weeks of testimony, the jury finally reached a verdict. Dincio was found guilty of orchestrating the heist and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. The judge noted the scale of the robbery and the meticulous planning involved, stating that Dincio's actions had caused significant financial harm to the bank and the community. As the sentence was read, Dincio remained motionless, his defiance unchanged. His gang members, some of whom had already been arrested, would also face their own trials. The robbery, though executed with precision, had long-lasting effects. The Bank of America, despite the loss, eventually recovered, but the psychological impact on its employees and the public remained for years. The gang's actions highlighted the vulnerabilities in bank security, leading to a nationwide reassessment of how financial institutions safeguard their assets. Meanwhile, Dincio's legacy would be cemented in history as one of the masterminds behind one of the most audacious bank robberies in U.S. history. In the early hours of August 7, 2005, an audacious group of criminals made history in Brazil with a meticulously planned heist. They struck Banco Central, a bank in Fortaleza, stealing over $70 million. It was an operation that would make any seasoned criminal envious. A 3-month-long plan that involved digging a 78-meter tunnel under the city. The criminals executed it with such precision that even the police couldn't trace their every move until it was too late. The criminals' masterstroke was their ingenious tunnel. They rented a house close to the bank and spent weeks digging beneath it. The tunnel, reinforced with wood, was designed to withstand collapses while providing access to the vault. No one suspected a thing. During daylight hours, the criminals kept up their normal lives, blending in as ordinary citizens, only working their plan under the cover of darkness. Banco Central's vault was a prize that no ordinary criminal could dream of accessing. With thick concrete walls, the vault seemed impenetrable, but the masterminds of this robbery had no such doubts. The tunnel they built led them directly into the vault's basement. Through their underground passage, they could now access the heart of the bank's fortune, leaving the vault's security systems unaffected above ground. For 3 long months, the criminals worked under the radar. They would enter the house they rented near the bank at night and work tirelessly to dig the tunnel. Their work was slow but steady, with each small victory bringing them closer to their goal. They even had to take great care to avoid any noise that could alert neighbors or passersby. Every day was a calculated risk. While the criminals were busy working underground, some had insider help. A few of them had inside knowledge of the bank's operations, such as security schedules and the vault's construction. This insider information was key to the success of the heist. The criminals knew exactly when and where to strike, and their knowledge allowed them to bypass numerous security measures that could have foiled their plan. As the tunnel neared completion, the criminals worked quickly to finalize their plan. They installed lighting, air vents, and even made sure the tunnel was properly reinforced. Everything had to be perfect. The final days were filled with tension as they prepared to break into the vault. One mistake could mean the end of their operation, but they were confident their preparation would carry them through. On the night of the heist, everything was set. The criminals entered their tunnel, taking tools and equipment with them. One by one, they crawled through the narrow passage, their hearts pounding with excitement and fear. As they reached the vault, they could see the riches that awaited them. It was a moment of triumph, yet they knew the real challenge was still ahead. Getting away with the money, breaking into the vault was not an easy task. The criminals needed to be careful not to trigger any alarms. They used cutting-edge tools to open the vault's door, taking hours of careful work. With each turn of the wrench and twist of the cutter, they drew closer to their goal. Finally, after hours of meticulous labor, they breached the vault. Inside the vault, stacks of cash lay waiting. The criminals wasted no time, swiftly filling bags with millions of dollars. They had planned for this moment, ensuring they had enough bags and transportation ready to get the money out without raising suspicion. The sheer amount of cash was mind-blowing, but the criminals were focused. They knew that the next step was critical, leaving without a trace. Once they had the money, the real challenge began. The criminals knew that leaving the bank would be their most dangerous task, but they had prepared for it. They had vehicles waiting outside, ready to whisk them away. The escape route had been mapped out for weeks, and every detail had been planned to perfection. The criminals exited the bank undetected, slipping through the shadows and into their waiting cars. They drove away into the night, never looking back. It was a clean escape, and no one had a clue they were even there. They had planned every step of the getaway with military precision, leaving no room for error. The police were initially clueless. No alarms had gone off, and there were no immediate signs of a break-in. But as investigators began their work, they found a peculiar clue. A small piece of fabric was discovered near the entrance, potentially left behind by one of the criminals. It was a faint lead, but it was a start. As the investigation continued, the police turned their attention to the money itself. They worked to track any movements of the stolen cash, hoping to catch a break. But the criminals had been clever. They knew that moving the money quickly would make it harder for authorities to trace. As the search for the culprits heated up, the police discovered that several of the criminals had connections to the bank. This was no ordinary robbery, it was an inside job. Those with inside knowledge had tipped the criminals off to the bank's schedules and vulnerabilities. The investigation uncovered a web of deceit. As the authorities dug deeper, they realized the heist was orchestrated by a sophisticated criminal network, not just a handful of thieves. They traced back the suspects to a series of illegal activities, including money laundering and prior heists. Slowly but surely, the police began to close in on the gang. One by one, the criminals were apprehended, but some of the masterminds behind the heist were still free, leaving the authorities on edge. The investigation had become a race against time. Despite their efforts, much of the stolen money was never recovered. Some was spent, others were laundered, and a portion was likely buried or hidden by the criminals. It was a major blow to the authorities, who had hoped to return the stolen funds to the bank. In the end, several members of the gang were arrested and tried, but the true masterminds of the heist remained at large for some time. The case became a legend in Brazil, studied by law enforcement and criminals alike as an example of precision and daring. The Banco Central heist taught authorities valuable lessons about the importance of security, both in banks and in dealing with inside threats. The bank's security measures were revamped, and law enforcement took steps to prevent similar crimes from occurring again. Even today, the Banco Central robbery remains one of the most daring heists in history. It continues to inspire awe and fear in equal measure. The criminals may have vanished, but their legacy lives on, a testament to the boldness and precision of one of the greatest heists ever attempted. Shadow Mysteries, unraveling the horrifying mysteries of crime cases. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch the next thrilling and suspenseful episodes. In 1952, a daring heist began to unfold in the heart of London. The target was none other than Lloyds Bank, a prestigious institution with a reputation for holding large sums of money. What was even more audacious was the way the criminals planned to access the bank's vaults. Rather than a traditional robbery, this was a meticulously planned underground operation. The mastermind behind the heist was Desmond Wolfe, a skilled criminal who had previous experience in underground thefts. He assembled a team of criminals who specialized in different areas, some in tunneling, others in explosives. Together, they had a plan that could have easily gone unnoticed for months. Using a leather goods store as their front, Wolfe's gang began digging a tunnel that stretched over 20 meters, making its way under the busy streets of London and directly into the vaults of Lloyds Bank. The criminals had to take great care not to make any noise or disturb the area around them. For weeks, the gang worked tirelessly under the cover of night, gradually making their way deeper. Each night, they would return to their hiding spots in the store, unnoticed by the public. It seemed as though they were ghosts, moving silently in the shadows. After months of careful work, the criminals finally reached the vault. They had successfully bypassed all the bank's security measures. The vault was guarded by thick concrete and reinforced steel, but the gang had brought with them the tools to break through it. Using a combination of explosives and a thermic lance, the gang breached the vault and gained access to the treasure trove inside. The sound of the explosion was muffled by the tunnel, and the vault door cracked open, revealing millions of pounds in cash and valuable items. The criminals worked quickly, filling bags with cash and valuables, including items from over 260 safety deposit boxes. They didn't leave any traces behind. Each member knew their role, ensuring the job was done swiftly and quietly. With the vault emptied, the criminals exited through the tunnel. They had a getaway car parked in a nearby alley. The tunnel not only led them to the vault, but also to their escape route, ensuring they could flee without being seen. Months later, the police received an anonymous tip. A radio enthusiast had overheard conversations about the heist while scanning radio frequencies. His information led to the discovery of the storefront that had been used for tunneling. Once the store was identified, the police began their investigation. They combed through the area, searching for any trace of the criminals, but despite their efforts, the robbers had vanished without a trace, leaving the authorities with no solid leads. Desmond Wolfe, the leader of the gang, was known for his experience in criminal activities, particularly in underground thefts. His ability to plan and execute such a sophisticated heist was unmatched. However, his past was a mystery, and the police were eager to learn more about him. Despite an intense investigation, the case remained unsolved for several years. The authorities followed numerous leads, but none of them led to Wolfe or his gang. The stolen money seemed to have disappeared without a trace, adding to the mystery of the heist. In 1973, after more than 2 decades, authorities finally made a breakthrough. Wolfe and several members of his gang were arrested. It turned out that they had used false identities and lived under the radar for many years, but they couldn't escape justice forever. Wolfe and his gang members were brought to trial, where they were charged with conspiracy, theft, and multiple counts of armed robbery. The court hearings were intense, with Wolfe maintaining his silence, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. His gang members testified, shedding light on the meticulously planned heist, giving the prosecution the solid case they needed. After months of court sessions, Wolfe and his gang were convicted. The robbery was deemed one of the most well-executed heists in British history. The sentence was harsh, with Wolfe receiving a lengthy prison sentence and his accomplices also serving significant time behind bars. The stolen money, however, was never fully recovered. The robbery had a lasting impact on Lloyds Bank and British banking security. It led to increased security measures at financial institutions across the UK, including advanced surveillance and tighter protocols. The heist was still a hot topic in the media long after Wolfe's conviction. The Lloyds Bank heist became infamous in criminal circles. Wolfe's gang was known for their precision and the calm manner in which they executed the robbery. Their use of an underground tunnel to bypass the bank's security was innovative, and this crime became a case study for future criminals. Though Wolfe spent many years in prison, his name became synonymous with sophisticated crime. His planning and execution of the Lloyds Bank heist remained a model of how to pull off an audacious robbery. His legacy continued to inspire many criminals, but it also served as a cautionary tale for those who thought they could outsmart the law. Despite the conviction of Wolfe and his gang, much of the stolen money was never recovered. Some believed that Wolfe had hidden it, perhaps to use it after his release. Rumors swirled about its whereabouts for years, but it was never found. The money remains one of the greatest mysteries of the heist. The Lloyds Bank heist stands as one of the most daring robberies in British history. While the criminals were eventually caught, their audacity and meticulous planning made it a remarkable case. For law enforcement, it was a victory, but for the criminals, it was a gamble that paid off, at least for a while. In 1997, on a quiet afternoon in Saint Petersburg, Florida, the Sun Trust Bank on Central Avenue looked like any other bustling branch. Little did the employees know, a well-planned robbery was about to unfold. Armed and ready, a group of criminals were about to make their bold move, setting in motion an event that would leave the community in shock. The robbers had meticulously planned the heist. Their strategy was simple yet daring, a direct assault on the bank, with weapons drawn. They didn't just want money, they aimed to take vital documents. The stakes were high and their timing impeccable. With tension mounting, they prepared to strike just as the bank's business was in full swing. In the early afternoon, the robbers stormed the SunTrust Bank. Armed with guns, they immediately took control of the situation, threatening staff and demanding cash. Panic spread through the bank as employees followed orders under duress, with their hands shaking as they handed over what was demanded. But the thieves weren't just after cash. They had their eyes on something far more valuable. As the robbers filled their bags with cash, one crucial mistake would soon lead to their downfall. In their haste to escape, they failed to disable the bank's silent alarm system. This unnoticed error would play a pivotal role in the eventual capture of the criminals, but at the time, the thieves felt confident as they quickly fled the scene. The robbers had a getaway plan in place, but it was far from flawless. With their loot secured, they raced to their escape vehicle. But in a twist, one of them decided to take a more unconventional route, a getaway bus. As if this bizarre decision wasn't enough, the criminals were about to realize that their escape was anything but secure. The silent alarm triggered a swift police response. Within minutes, officers swarmed the area, gathering information and trying to track down the criminals. Eyewitnesses reported seeing a tall man wearing a long white shirt fleeing the scene, which gave police a valuable lead. But it was one rookie officer's gut instinct that would prove decisive. Officer Rachel Hunter, a newcomer to the force, followed her intuition as she raced to a nearby bus terminal. She spotted a group of people sitting calmly on a bench, but something didn't feel right. Among them, she noticed a man matching the description of the robber. The bus was about to leave, and she knew she had to act fast. As Officer Hunter approached the bus, she alerted her colleagues. The suspect was just moments away from disappearing into the city. Without hesitation, they moved in, and the tension reached a breaking point. With every second counting, the officers were determined not to let the criminal escape. But would they catch him before he got away? Realizing he was about to be caught, the suspect attempted a daring escape. He tried to flee on the bus, hoping to blend in with the passengers. But with the police closing in, his plan quickly unraveled. As the bus rolled away, the officers had already surrounded it. There was no way out now. His capture was imminent. With swift precision, officers boarded the bus and apprehended the suspect. The air was thick with tension as they cuffed him and brought him into custody. The criminal's escape plan had failed, but the robbery itself was far from over. What they didn't know was that this was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. As the investigation continued, the police learned that this wasn't just a simple robbery. The criminals had stolen not only cash, but also critical documents from the bank, potentially compromising sensitive information. The authorities were now facing a much more complex situation, one that could have far-reaching consequences for the bank's clients and the public. The pressure was on. The investigation took an unexpected turn when police learned that one of the robbers had an extensive criminal background. With this new information, authorities began to connect the dots, leading them to a series of other robberies in the region. The robbers, it seemed, had been involved in more than one heist, and now the police had to track down the rest of the crew. The police used their knowledge of the criminals' backgrounds to track down the remaining members of the crew. They spread out, placing surveillance on several locations, and patiently waited for the criminals to make their move. After weeks of tense waiting, one of the crew members slipped up, providing the police with a vital lead that would eventually lead to their capture. The moment of truth arrived when police cornered the remaining robbers. With no escape route left, the criminals had no choice but to surrender. The sting operation was a success. All members of the gang were arrested and brought in for questioning. Their heist had come to a swift and dramatic end, but the story didn't end there. After the robbery, the authorities continued to investigate the full extent of the crime. They found that the robbers had meticulously planned every detail of the heist, including the theft of confidential documents. The stolen documents could have had major financial implications, and the bank's clients were put at risk. The investigation into the case would continue for months, and the fallout from the crime would leave an indelible mark on the community. The motives behind the SunTrust robbery began to unfold as investigators delved deeper into the lives of the criminals. It was revealed that the gang had targeted the bank specifically for its weak security measures and the large sum of cash available. The documents stolen were just as valuable to them as they contained insider information that could potentially be sold for a high price, The robbery had been a calculated move to secure their financial freedom. As the robbers were brought to trial, the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The gang members' defense lawyers tried to paint them as victims of circumstance, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, witness testimony, and the stolen documents were presented as undeniable proof of their guilt. The trial would become one of the most publicized criminal cases of the year. When the verdict was finally delivered, the robbers were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Their crime had shocked the public, and many felt that the punishment was fitting for such a bold and calculated act. The stolen documents were eventually recovered, but the trauma of the robbery lingered in the minds of the bank's employees and clients. It was a reminder of the vulnerability that even the most trusted financial institutions could face. Though the criminals were caught and punished, the aftermath of the SunTrust robbery had long-lasting effects. The case brought to light the vulnerabilities in the security systems of major banks, leading to reforms in how financial institutions secured their assets. The stolen documents were not just a symbol of the heist, but a catalyst for change in the banking industry. As time passed, the SunTrust robbery became a part of criminal history, a reminder of how even the most meticulously planned heists can be unraveled. For the criminals involved, their actions would forever be a cautionary tale of greed and hubris. For the banking industry, it was a wake-up call to the importance of security. And the story of this audacious heist would continue to be told for years to come. On January 13, 2006, the bustling city of Buenos Aires wakes up to a daring heist at the Banco Rio in Acasuso. News spreads like wildfire. A group of 6 armed men has stormed the bank, taking dozens of hostages. The authorities and media quickly gather outside, setting the stage for a long, tense standoff. Inside the bank, the robbers present themselves as calm and calculated. While one of them controls the hostages, others focus on locating the vault. To the surprise of the authorities, the robbers appear unfazed, even chatting and reassuring the hostages that they'll be unharmed. The atmosphere is tense, yet strangely calm. Police outside devise a plan. The officers are well-trained, but the robbers' calm demeanor and friendly exchanges with hostages create a peculiar tension. Authorities hesitate to rush in, uncertain of the criminals' next move. Meanwhile, negotiators work to establish contact, hoping to defuse the situation peacefully. Hours pass, and the robbers finally communicate with police. They demand food, drinks, and time to resolve their business within the bank. Puzzled by the odd requests, the authorities comply, hoping that a peaceful resolution is near. But behind the scenes, the robbers' true plan is unfolding. The police, unaware of the robbers' elaborate escape plan, focus on securing the perimeter. Hours go by as negotiators talk to the robbers. The public outside waits anxiously, watching the news unfold, not realizing that the robbers are already steps ahead in their carefully crafted plot. As dusk falls, the robbers continue to maintain their friendly facade with hostages. Unbeknownst to the police, they are digging into the bank's basement. A hidden tunnel, built meticulously beforehand, leads to the city's sewer system, their ultimate escape route. The robbers' meticulous preparation is now evident. They use fake weapons and disguises to mislead the police, giving an impression of high-tech weaponry. Meanwhile, they dig the tunnel with military-like precision, making each second count as the standoff continues. Negotiators make progress, but the robbers continue to stall. They hint at releasing the hostages but change their demands at the last moment. This tactic keeps the police engaged, giving the robbers the extra time they need to finish their escape tunnel. After nearly a full day, the robbers decide it's time. Using a well-coordinated plan, they bid farewell to the hostages, reassuring them of their safety. The robbers, masked and organized, prepare to vanish into the depths of their escape tunnel. The police move in, only to find the bank empty. Stunned, they realize the robbers are gone, along with millions of dollars in cash and valuables. The officers rush to check the vault and discover the cleverly hidden tunnel leading into the darkness. The discovery of the tunnel shocks the police. Running beneath the bank and connecting to the city's sewer system, the tunnel reflects the robbers' detailed planning. The authorities now realize they were dealing with far more than an ordinary heist. This was a highly orchestrated operation. Meanwhile, the robbers make their way through the sewer system. Their escape is flawless, leaving no trace behind. Police are left scouring the dark tunnels, searching in vain as the criminals vanish into the underground maze. The heist has been pulled off to near perfection. As daylight breaks, police start piecing together the events. The meticulous planning, the elaborate tunnel, and the fake weapons all indicate a heist months in the making. The robbers didn't just take money, they left behind a story that would captivate Argentina. The media coverage explodes. People are mesmerized by the sheer audacity and ingenuity of the heist. The robbers become infamous overnight, dubbed the gentlemen robbers, due to their calm demeanor and the peaceful handling of hostages. Authorities launch a massive investigation. They analyze the tunnel structure, search for leads in the sewer system, and review surveillance footage, but each attempt yields little. The robbers seem to have covered every angle, leaving police frustrated and empty-handed. As days turn into weeks, the public fascination only grows. Conspiracy theories emerge, and people speculate about who could have orchestrated such a flawless operation. Some even romanticize the robbers, calling them modern-day Robin Hoods. Eventually, clues start to surface. An informant provides a lead that helps identify a suspect. Police follow the tip, leading them to a few of the robbers who have returned to their regular lives, seemingly untouched by the media frenzy surrounding them. The arrests begin. Several members of the gang are captured, revealing the brilliant minds behind the operation. However, some of the gang members remain elusive, having disappeared with part of the loot. The authorities have only partially cracked the case. Despite the arrests, the legend of the Banco Rio heist lives on. The robbers' story has already become folklore, symbolizing both the audacity and complexity of the human mind. Their story remains a reminder of one of Argentina's most unforgettable crimes. The Banco Rio heist remains in Argentina's history as more than just a crime. It's a tale of risk, intellect, and suspense. The mysterious elements and daring escape captured the world's imagination, turning this bank robbery into a timeless saga of thrill and intrigue.